with outside experts. We talked among ourselves, and we determined that even though the subpoena was obligatory, that we were required to respond to it, we can always ask a question. And so we asked the question, and we sent an email from my department that I read into the record earlier, asking for special counsel's views on the potential constitutional implications under Article 1.
Did this subpoena include a non-disclosure order with it?
It did, Senator.
But that didn't stop you from conducting a basic inquiry?
No, it did not.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you did the inquiry because, as it turns out, the non-disclosure order was totally illegal. As we've covered now exhaustively in this hearing and in others, statutes in place on the books in 2020 require notification to sitting members of Congress if their information is subpoenaed in any way, not to mention the contract that the Sergeant-at-Arms has with all three of the major telecoms. So I'm glad you did your job. My question for you is, Mr. Miller, why didn't you do any of this?
Senator, at that time, and I recognize we should have had a better process here, but at that time, we did not train our subpoena analysts to do a searching inquiry into the subscriber associated with a particular.
What does that mean? What does that mean? You just didn't bother to try and associate the phone number with any name?
Senator, we respect the privacy of our customers, and we...
Okay, so you just saw that clip. And if you're anything like me, you probably felt something watching that. Whether that's anger, relief, or just plain shock that someone is finally saying what needed to be said out loud in a Senate hearing room on the record. That was Senator Josh Hawley going to work on Verizon's representative. And honestly, good. Because what came out in that hearing is something every single American with a phone in their pocket needs to hear. Your government subpoenaed your phone records. Your telecom company, the one you pay every single month, handed that information over without blinking. No questions asked. No pushback. Nothing. And the kicker? They knew how to find your name. They do it every month when they send you a bill. They just didn't think your privacy was worth the effort. Now I've watched a lot of Senate hearings. Most of them are theater. Politicians grandstanding without actually saying anything real. But this one is different. And I want to break down exactly why after we watch the full video together. If you care about your privacy, if you care about government overreach, if you care about corporations selling you out the moment authority comes knocking, hit subscribe right now. This is exactly where we talk about things that actually matter. Like the video if you're already fired up. Let's get into it. All right.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks to the witnesses for being here. Mr. McAtee, let me just start with you. I just want to try to drill down and get clear on what happened here. When you got a subpoena from Jack Smith for Senator Cruz's records, you pushed back on this. How did you do that? I mean, how did you know it was Senator Cruz whose records were being requested?
In that case, Senator, it was fairly obvious. The subscriber name was Ted Cruz for Senate, so we put it together.
Yeah. Huh. So you thought to actually look at the number and match it up and maybe see if there might be a legal problem here. You asked a few questions. Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
And
Senator.
what happened next?
What happened next was we did some research, as you would expect any legal department to do. As I mentioned earlier, we consulted with outside experts. We talked among ourselves. And we determined that even though the subpoena was obligatory, that we were required to respond to it, we can always ask a question. And so we asked the question, and we sent an email from my department that I read into the record earlier, asking for special counsel's views on the potential constitutional implications under Article 1.
Did this subpoena include a non-disclosure order with it?
It did, Senator.
But that didn't stop you from conducting a basic inquiry?
No, it did not.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you did the inquiry because, as it turns out, the non-disclosure order was totally illegal. As we've covered now exhaustively in this hearing and in others, statutes in place on the books in 2020 require notification to sitting members of Congress if their information is subpoenaed in any way, not to mention the contract that the Sergeant-at-Arms has with all three of the major telecoms. So I'm glad you did your job. My question for you is, Mr. Miller, why didn't you do any of this?
Senator, at that time, and I recognize we should have had a better process here, but at that time, we did not train our subpoena analysts to do a searching inquiry into the subscriber associated with a particular.
What does that mean? What does that mean? You just didn't bother to try and associate the phone number with any name?
Senator, we respect the privacy of our customers, and we did not want...
Apparently not, because you turned over every piece of information from every senator sitting on this dais who got any illegal subpoena. You turned it over with no process at all. So let's skip that part. Just get to the part where you tell me why you didn't do anything that Mr. McAtee did.
Senator, The process we have in place now would largely.
I'm not
mirror
interested in that. I'm interested in why you didn't do any of the basic investigation. Ask a question, you get a subpoena for all of these numbers, and your testimony is you just handed over the documents, you didn't do anything? Is that what happened?
3 reasons, Senator. So first, when we receive a subpoena, we do not know the nature of the investigation or the sensitivities involved. Second, as I mentioned, we train our subpoena analysts to respect the confidentiality and the privacy of our
So you don't try to
subscribers.
match up, you don't look and match up the numbers. You're telling me you don't try to associate a number with a name. You don't do that.
No, Senator. We do now for members of Congress, but that was not the procedure at the time.
Really? Because you testified to Senator Durbin not long ago that you disclosed all of the names to this committee of all of the people who are associated with the numbers, including mine. So clearly you had the ability to do it, you just didn't do it. Is that correct?
We had the ability to do it. Yes,
But you
Senator.
didn't do it.
We thought we had good reasons for that, Senator.
Why is that? You don't have any problem associating names with accounts when you go to bill people, which you do every month. I seem to recall getting a bill from you monthly. You had no problem associating my name with my number when you wanted money from me. But when it came to protecting the basic rights of your consumers, your subscribers, your customers, you couldn't be bothered?
No, Senator, I would not say that.
I would. I think I just did.
I would too.
Senator,
Why didn't you follow the contract that you have with the United States government? You've got a contract worth millions of dollars with the United States government, which obligates you to inform the Sergeant at Arms if you get any requests for processor information from a senator or any number associated with that contract. That contract was in place, and that language was in place when these subpoena requests came through, and you didn't do any of it. Why is that?
Senator, I don't agree that we.
You don't agree with what?
That we violated the contract.
Really?
with the
The
Senate.
contract says that you are obliged to inform the Senate when any records are demanded. And I'm quoting here from a letter not from Senator Graham, not from a Republican. It's from Senator Ron Wyden, who sent a dear colleague letter to every member of the United States Senate, May 21st, 2025, notifying us that these contract terms were being regularly violated by your company, among others. So why didn't you follow the contract that you were making millions of dollars on? Why didn't you do that?
Senator, I get your frustration with this issue, but the contract.
No, I just want the truth. I'm frustrated because we get the runaround constantly. We've gotten it all day from you. So why didn't you follow the contract?
Senator, the contract covers a definition of Senate data. At this time, we did not interpret the contract to apply to the kind
phone
of
lines?
records, to the kind of records that Verizon generates, as opposed to records.
Oh,
that
for
the
heaven's
Senate
sake.
generates.
This is just absurd. And I'll just say this, Madam Chair. We're talking here about members of Congress. If you are a normal person, if you are a working person out there, just think of the fact that these guys, with one exception, Mr. McAtee's company, AT&T, all the other guys just handed over this data. They couldn't do it fast enough. They rushed to do it. They can find you when they want to bill you. They can find you in a heartbeat. When it comes time to protect your data, they're nowhere to be found. It is absolutely a disgrace. And the fact that you testified earlier that you get hundreds of thousands of requests for personal information every year is chilling, because what all your customers should know is you just turn it over willy-nilly. I would expect better from you, from all of you, frankly. I think what you've done here is outrageous, and I think the implications for the privacy of the American people are absolutely unbelievable. Thank you, Mr. McAtee, for protecting your customers. I wish these other guys would do the same. I tell you what, everybody ought to go to AT&T, because Verizon and whoever you are, T-Mobile, you guys are terrible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hawley. I want to follow on with one question to each of the telecoms, because Jack Smith, in his hearing at the House, said he could not recall how many members of Congress had had their privacy violated. So to each of the telecoms here this morning, I want to go down the line and ask you, are there additional members of Congress that you received requests for their information? Mr. Miller?
Senator, we believe that either from the former special counsel's office or a predecessor law enforcement entity, we received subpoenas for a total of 15 members of Congress.
And that's it. Mr.
believe-
Nelson?
One member of Congress.
Mr. McAtee?
No additionals, the ones we discussed, 4 total.
Thank you. Senator Whitehouse, you're recognized.
We just watched the whole thing. Here's my honest take. I don't always agree with Josh Hawley on everything. But what he did in that room, that was exactly what a senator is supposed to do. That was oversight. That was accountability. That was someone who did his homework and walked in ready to not let anyone off the hook. The moment that got me was the billing line. Hawley looks at the Verizon rep and basically says, "You have no problem finding my name when you want money from me every month. But when it came to protecting my rights as your customer, suddenly you couldn't be bothered?" That is one of the most accurate things said in a Senate hearing in a long time. Because it is completely true. These companies know exactly who you are. Your name, your address, your payment history, your usage. The moment a government subpoena lands on their desk, they develop amnesia? Come on. Then there's the contract issue, and this part is getting buried when it shouldn't be. There was a contract that Verizon was being paid millions of taxpayer dollars to honor. It explicitly required them to notify the sergeant at arms if congressional records were ever requested. That is not a technicality. That is not a gray area. That is a written legal obligation they simply ignored and then sat in front of the Senate and tried to argue their way out of it. The fact that Senator Ron Wyden, a Democrat and not exactly Hawley's political ally, had to send a letter to every member of the Senate in May 2025 saying these companies are violating their contract tells you everything. This is not a Republican or Democrat issue. This is a basic rule of law issue. Now the contrast matters. AT&T's rep comes in and says, "We got the subpoena, we saw the name Ted Cruz for Senate. We stopped, we asked questions, we consulted lawyers, we pushed back." They did the right thing even with a non-disclosure order hanging over them. Verizon's answer? "We didn't train our people to look at who the records belonged to." I'm sorry, what? You didn't train your people to notice they might be handing over a sitting United States senator's private communications? That's your defense? Hawley was right to say what he said at the end. Because if they'll do this to senators, people with legal protections and staff and lawyers and a public profile, imagine what they're doing with your records. You don't have a legal team. You don't have a sergeant-at-arms contract. You don't have a Senate hearing to drag these companies into when they betray you. And that number. 15 members of Congress from Verizon alone. Jack Smith apparently couldn't even remember how many members of Congress had their privacy violated. The scope was so wide the man who ordered the subpoenas lost count. What Hawley did in this hearing was remind these corporations that they answer to someone. He was sharp, he was prepared, and he was right. The message for the rest of us is simple. Know who is protecting your data and who is not. Because these companies will smile at you in their ads, give you a free phone, bill you like clockwork, and hand over your information before you even know it happened. I'm glad someone finally said it like it is. Let me know in the comments. Are you switching carriers? Should there be criminal penalties for this? What did you think of Hawley in this hearing? I want to hear from you. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. See you in the next one.